Họ nên cao với nói ăn xài họ cô cái gì nó thấy cô phải nghe nói cô nên tao nói ăn cả không thì nó lại vui thật xa họ nói cái tàu cái hào mà tại tôi thì mau ăn cek to mau ăn cái gì à kalau mà tại tôi cái business account là cáiว่าcái vào cái 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 foi na pe ku fa to han na ku fa na mari e pe ka kai fu ne papa na fu ma na ko ta fa pe ne ta ko oh pe ve ta ta ni ma kai ne ta ko ha me la ve ta 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 kai ne we can do it ai na fa na we na ve ana ne vì lâu la hi fu ma ke ko ke la ke te na e na we kan go fa fu ma ke mo pe ta ti no ko le na yo fa ha ko na ma ti te te ma me ko ku wa ko pe ni ata ta ko ko pe ma me ko ilo la ya ni ke fa ha ko te ni pe ko le
Great. I don't know if this is working. Great. It's working. Yes. This is great. It's so wonderful to see everyone in person. I know you've heard it this morning in the plenary, but it's good to be back at ASEF and with all the wonderful people that come to this forum. And since we heard people sort of talking about how many ASEFs they participated in, this is my fourth ASEF that I attend, but the last two have been online, so this is great. Welcome to our session, and wasn't that inspirational in terms of how in the Pacific in Tonga, we are actually, the project has been able to achieve 30% of women's participation in the energy workforce. So I thought we could start with a little bit of inspiration. So this session is called Women in the Energy Workforce and Leadership Roles. We have quite a diverse and interesting lineup of speakers today. So for the next 1.5 hours, we will hear their experiences in the region, including working in Nepal, Indonesia, and in Fiji. So by way of introduction, my name is Zonabel Woods. I'm a senior social development specialist working on gender in the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department here at ADB. And for the first time, ASEF is including a gender equality track. And I have had the privilege to serve as a track chair. It's again, really good to be here and to see so many women and men working on gender and energy. So maybe we can start by celebrating ourselves and the gender energy track. So we know that the energy sector has lacked gender diversity. However, it is a sector that is changing fast, and you will hear stories about how that sector is changing from our speakers. And with that change come a lot of opportunities to right the existing power imbalance. And this is what this session is about. Women face many challenges at every stage of their career in non-traditional occupations, such as those found in the energy sector. So we will discuss interventions that are making a difference in tackling barriers during recruitment, retention, promotion, advancement, and leadership. Now, for the format, we have 4 speakers, and so they will make a 10-minute presentation, and then this will be followed by a panel discussion where we will invite you to ask questions and engage in discussion with our panelists. So our first speaker is Ellen Bomasang. So I will ask her to please come up. Yes. And By way of introduction, just very quickly, she's a global development professional whose focus has been on clean energy, climate, and inclusive growth across Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East for the last 25 years. And she's the principal global equity, diversity, inclusion for ABT Associates. So Ellen, welcome. Yes, I hear. Okay. Sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be back in person at ASEF and an honor to be part of this particular panel. So my presentation today is titled Pathways to Women's Representation and Leadership in the Energy Sector. So when I first sat down with this topic in mind, I wanted this presentation to be a collection of best practices that I've learned in designing and implementing gender and energy interventions across projects in various countries, and also collaborating with peers in this space throughout the year. So this is by no means exhaustive, but it is my take. So so globally, many of you have probably seen this statistic. Women represent 22% of the conventional energy sector workforce. And in terms of leadership roles, that number is even lower at 12%. So the numbers are more promising when it comes to the global renewable energy sector, where they represent 32%. However, if we look more deeply at those numbers, 45% of women in RE are in administrative roles. So I wanted to note that this is a phenomenon that happens in both developed and developing countries. So in the US, women represent only 25% of the energy workforce versus 47% of the overall American labor force. Then in Asia, the number of women in energy ranges between 3 and 15%, while the number of women engineers or technicians is even lower, between 1 and 6%. So the benefits of diversity in any organization are well documented. So according to studies, gender balanced leadership teams and workforces see consistently higher financial returns, up to 19 percentage points, and lower earnings risk. And companies with diverse leadership teams are also more likely to have carbon reduction targets and perform better on climate indicators. One more thing I wanted to note, global investments in energy are estimated to reach approximately $2.8 trillion in 2023, and 1.7 trillion of that is going to clean energy. So we have an industry that's growing dramatically, and there's a clear business case for women's increased involvement in the sector, and yet there's continued underrepresentation. So there's clearly a disconnect that must be addressed. So what are the barriers that women face? So I've classified them here into cultural and organizational barriers. So in terms of cultural barriers, energy is still considered a male domain in most places. So many women are still discouraged from pursuing careers in the energy sector. Then many women play the role of caregiver in the home, and they often find themselves having to balance professional responsibilities with personal or family obligations. Then gender stereotypes are perpetuated early when girls make decisions on what studies to pursue. So they're often encouraged, or they decide on their own to pursue non-technical fields, resulting in a smaller pipeline. Then women have limited access to formal finance, limiting their ability to participate in the energy value chain. So they're often viewed as high risk by financial institutions. They lack collateral. Then many women energy entrepreneurs don't even apply for loans because of low financial literacy, risk aversion, or fear of failure. So in terms of the organizational barriers, women often grapple with an institutional culture where gender bias manifested in both subtle and overt ways is entrenched. They also have limited access to education and training, networks, mentoring, and sponsoring opportunities. And then you have HR policies and practices that are inflexible and insensitive to their needs. So like, as we all know, many jobs in the sector involve travel to and extended stays in the field. So that's challenging for women. They also often encounter pay equity issues. So all these result in low attraction and or retention rates. So how do we break down these barriers? So I'm tackling 6 pathways in this presentation. So one extremely critical pathway is providing training and education opportunities for women and girls. We often hear that there aren't enough women in the sector because there isn't a big enough pipeline of qualified candidates. So active promotion of STEM education among girls in the secondary and tertiary levels is one way to directly address this challenge. Then increasing women's access to training and education through scholarships, tailored curricula, and internships is another strategy. Engineering departments in many universities have adapted their curricula to increase women's enrollment. Then private companies and donors are also doing internship programs to provide women with on-the-job training and then later opportunities for employment. Then we have private companies like Celco and donors like USAID and GIZ promoting training of women in what are considered unconventional roles in the sector, like solar home system installation, and then operation and maintenance, and even wiring. And then leadership training is also essential, as is training in business, finance, marketing, which is needed by women who want to be entrepreneurs in the space. And then challenging long-standing cultural and social norms is another pathway. So this one takes time and should begin with an examination of the current culture, followed by a reframing of goals and priorities as appropriate. So leadership buy-in is essential here. It's vital to raise awareness among the organization's leadership and the employees as to why equity, one, makes good business sense, and two, is the right thing to do. So if it doesn't yet exist, there should be an overarching equity policy or vision statement and accompanying measures like a code of conduct, training on unconscious bias, etc. Then research also shows that championing role models in an organization has an amplified benefit for women. Then enforcement of accountability measures is also key. So at my organization, which is APT Associates, how well leaders promote equity within their teams is considered a factor in determining their annual bonus. So that's just an example. And then being part of a network where women can share experiences, hear advice from peers and experts, and establish contacts that open up employment and advancement opportunities is another pathway. And so is having mentors who provide trusted advice on how to navigate the organization. Then some organizations establish mentorship programs with a male allyship theme, while others have reverse mentorship programs where a junior employee might teach a senior employee new skills, like, for example, like how to be more savvy on social media. So the fourth pathway is integrating the gender perspective, energy, policy, and programming. So fortunately, we've come a long way through the years. It used to be that many policies were completely gender blind, but today many countries have adopted policies or integrated gender clauses focused on mainstreaming gender in energy. And then in all stages of the energy project cycle, actively engaging women increases the chances of sustainability. So for instance, if you're designing an energy access project, it's essential to take the perspectives of women into consideration at the outset, since they play a significant role in managing the household's energy consumption. So similarly, in the tariff design exercise, you should also include their inputs for the same reason. So to address the access to finance barrier, we have gender lens investing, which is an approach that integrates gender-based factors across the investment process to better inform investment decisions and advance gender equality. Then you have training financial institutions like banks to better respond to the needs of women-owned and operated businesses, designing innovative financing mechanisms, especially in the off-grid RE value chain where women can be technology distributors, and then supporting women-owned and led companies like to help them learn how to prepare business plans and doing investment pitches to better equip them to access financing. So finally, I can't overemphasize the importance of leveraging partnerships. So it's common to see several donors working in the gender and energy space in a country or region trying to meet similar goals. So closely coordinating to make sure the expertise and resources are being maximized so we achieve common goals is very important. So that brings me to my 10 minutes. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ellen. So our next speaker is Kira Rosie Schumacher. She's the Deputy Chief of Party for the USA AID Urja Nepal. And Kira is a manager with Deloitte Consulting with a professional experience in developing strategy, finance, and supply chain solutions across emerging economies in Asia and Africa. So I won't read her whole bio. It's available on the website, but she is clearly someone with a lot of experience and commitment to the area of gender and energy. And we're really happy to have her with us as one of our speakers. So please, Kira. That'll help. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your kind introduction. I'm so happy to be here today to speak to you a little bit about a project that's very close and dear to one of my project's key initiatives, and that is to support women leadership in the energy sector in Nepal. So as we know, and as Ellen rightly pointed out, women are disproportionately affected at all levels by a lack of access to energy and as underrepresentation as leaders and policymakers. So you can see some of the challenges here, and I won't go through them all, but for our projects, I wanted to show you how we're aligned to the advancement of women leaders in the sector. And so ours is to target this idea of underrepresentation and to help them gain greater footing in not only technical roles, but also supervisory roles. So to give some background and some rationale for this particular initiative, we understand that it's important to recognize that gender inclusivity has a direct positive impact on the energy sector, as well as on a country's economics. So there's in fact a negative correlation between electricity and poverty rates. And women in particular, though they are more likely to connect to energy or electricity, let's say, they tend to be more economically disadvantaged in their access to electricity. Similarly, for businesses, including utilities, that have more balanced female participation are more likely to be successful. This is because more participation means that they're more representative of their customer base. And it actually tends to improve customer service relationships between the utility and their customers as a result of either more detailed products or better engagement. And in fact, to add to that, women tend to be the marketers of their community. And so as you build that rapport in customer service, you can actually see the results in a broader scale when women are included. So women have a pretty substantial and impactful role to play across the energy sector. So a few of these roles would include as energy users, as employees of our companies or within the government, energy value chain participants, perhaps as entrepreneurs or developers, vendors, and even as decision makers. And again, repeating a bit of what Ellen said, studies show that when women have equal access to energy and economic opportunities, there are significant productivity gains, not only for a project or a company, but also for the development of the country as a whole. So what does this mean for Nepal? In Nepal, there still remain many structural barriers to gender equality in the sector. In particular, we see a continued lack of representation, particularly in hydropower projects, where studies have shown only 10% of employees are women. There's also a huge gender pay gap, where women earn roughly 1/3 less than their male counterparts. Yet, there have also been many advances in affirmative action policies in Nepal, including quotas for women's representation and more gender inclusive policy development, as well as trainings. So support from the government to advance and support women has started to include more inclusive leadership. The concern that we found, and that often perhaps goes unnoticed, is that while quotas do create more women leaders, it also pushes many women into management positions, often without the experience or the tools that they would need to succeed in their new positions. So Urgent Nepal's strategy is to focus on these areas of support that can complement some of the new policies and quotas to support gender equality and work in partnership with the government to advance gender equity. So Urge's response. To address these challenges, we launched a development in leadership and management skills training for women in the energy sector. This program was designed around 3 basic pillars. One was enhancing technical expertise on sectoral issues. 2 was building leadership skills, which can help women navigate the male-dominated energy sector. 3 was to provide a networking platform for women to share and learn from each other's experiences. And our final approach, though not part of this actual diagram, was to actually enlist male allies and champions in the sector by raising awareness through this training with our counterparts. So this particular design was actually co-designed with women leaders in Nepal, who were asked what they felt was missing in their ability to lead in the sector. So this was actually designed to respond to those asks, to provide the tools and skills that women were looking for. Oh, too far, sorry. So for this program, just to give you a little background on, this is our first cohort of this training and we're hoping to do another one. We had 30 women as representatives across 6 key institutions in the power sector of Nepal. I should acknowledge that all of these women are incredibly accomplished in their own right. So this was just an additional training to provide to them for some of the asks they felt they were missing. These participants attended around a 6-month period of training for 12 total sessions. That's over 5,000 hours. These hours were used for 6 technical sessions, and these were on topics that were of particular relevance or are new in the sector in Nepal. For example, cross-border electricity trade, which has become greater importance after Nepal has finally been able to trade on the Indian Power Exchange within the last year, and that engagement bilaterally is only increasing. We also complemented that with 6 leadership trainings, and these were focused on soft skills like public speaking, better communication skills, how to be an effective leader in a room full of men or when your team is only men, and of course, problem solving. So to give you a taste of the impact, and I will caveat that this training just ended a couple of weeks ago, so we're still pulling together all the metrics, but I wanted to give you an impression of what that looks like. We reported 75% of participants felt that they had an improvement in their technical knowledge in the sector. This means the participants shared their life and work experiences as both women and leaders in the sector, both positive and negative, and listened to each other's experiences and learned how to problem solve different technical topics. The second one is that 63% experienced a boost in self-confidence and improvement in public speaking skills. So participants, you could see from the first session to the second to the third, felt more empowered with these sessions. They had a willingness to speak up and engage with the material. And they told us that this was one of the first times they really felt they had a safe place with women among women to talk about these topics. And then finally, 50% of the women noted an improved career perspectives following their participation. So this we have to prove later, I'm sure. But what we really wanted to share with this metric is that they felt more empowered by this to go after work that was traditionally given to their male colleagues and to demand instead that they be able to deliver on it because it should be their role. So to conclude, our program attempted to empower these women with new skills and knowledge, but also attempted to foster a strong sense of camaraderie and collaboration among these participants. We learned so much from these women leaders, and this training is our first in the sector. But we were really excited to see that these shared experiences created a ripple effect, inspiring more positive change within the power sector and among our participants. So I'd like to have a couple takeaways to leave with you at the end of my session. One, gender equality doesn't just take women, we also need men. And so while this training focused on creating this community of women and leaders in the sector to share their concepts and ideas, our next step will be to empower more male allyship and champions in the sector to continue this work and to make sure that when those women go to demand more of the work in the sector, that their male allies support them as well. And the second is that we need to continue to foster an inclusive network of women helping women. So a lot of our participants told us they felt completely alone in the room and they were unsure or unclear of how many other women were in the sector experiencing some of the same problems or issues that they were. And so this training really gave them that ongoing support to talk about these issues and remind themselves that while we might not be in school anymore, it's not your classmates, there are colleagues across the different organizations, not just your own. And so if you feel alone in one, there's other people to reach out to that can help you learn those skills that you might need. And it's crucial, of course, to not feel alone on that journey. So I want to thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about this training. And truly a kudos to all the women that we worked to in this session. I feel very honored to work with them and honored to be presenting their work to you. Thank you.
Can't lose the clicker. Okay, so I think that was a perfect segue from male allyship to our next speaker, who is a man who has worked on a gender policy in Fiji, which actually has done a very good job in mainstreaming gender, and you will hear about that policy next. So our next speaker is Daniela Tabuya. He's the principal energy analyst with the Department of Energy in Fiji. And he has worked with the department since 2014. And he has led the work in the formulation of the SDG 7 roadmap for Fiji, electrification policy 2022, and the review of the national energy policy. So Daniela, can I invite you to come up and present your work?
Bula, everyone. Oh, thank you, Zara, for the introduction. I'm so glad that I was given an opportunity to actually speak on behalf of my colleagues in Fiji on the national energy policy. Especially this policy has been reviewed for actually 3 years. The main core of this policy was to actually highlight how gender equality in the energy sector and how we can strengthen it as well. Not only in Fiji, but it's just an overview also for the Pacific as well. So just a clear indication of this is the whole map of Fiji. The target areas that we wanted to target are the ones in the maritime islands, instead of the 2 big islands that we actually, most educated women, most educated men are already there. They already have a specific idea on what's actually within the, especially the topic of gender equity. But within our islands in blue, you can see those areas where culture plays a major role. In the Pacific, you may have heard, you may have also seen that culture is a main barrier in order to introduce gender equity, especially for those Pacific Islanders. So just just a highlight on how we were able to actually introduce this within our national energy policy. Just an overview. Our current targets, as you mentioned, plenty of people have also said that the Pacific targets are very ambitious. Especially, you can see before our actual target for 100% electricity access was 2021, but actually we have moved it to 2026. And renewable energy generation by 2036, 100%. So with all these policies that are in hand, when we were drafting the national energy policy for Fiji, we were thinking of how we can achieve this. So we can only achieve this if we involve women in the energy sector as well. So those are the areas that we were focused on while we were actually reviewing our national energy policy. Our current policies, the electrification policy, most of these policies in the past, gender equity was just floating in the air. If someone asked, what about gender? They'll say, gender is already embedded into the policy. But actual work on the ground, there was nothing at all. So what we had to check from the past and the future, we tried to change all that in order to strengthen this, to strengthen gender equity, especially involving everyone in every sector, from engineering, especially in like some of our speakers is mentioning, installing solar, especially maintaining it for the people in the maritime islands. So we had made plans as well. We have worked with some ministries, some NGOs. I think some NGOs actually involved in making this happen. And I'll show you in my slides. So for our current policies now, these are new policies that has been just currently passed by cabinet. These policies have strengthened gender equity, has involved how women can be involved in this, especially in the energy sector. Creates a pathway for them, also shows particular areas where people, institutions, NGOs can also come in to assist in these areas. So for just a highlight of our national energy policy, you can see directly improves gender equity by empowerment and through targeted objectives. These targeted objectives, I've also mentioned how we can actually work together with the communities in order to make this happen. These are critical areas where in the Pacific that we need to focus on. I've also like to mention reviews and what's currently happening in the Pacific are two different things. The Pacific, the culture in the Pacific with the chiefs and just a hierarchy of different hierarchies within the villages, men needs to be educated. The main focus for this, once you educate the men in the Pacific, it's easier for them to get educated and get a clear mind on how we can actually work, that we need the woman in the energy sector in order to achieve such targets as well. You can see in our strategic action plan, this is our strategic action plan. I just took two of it from it, just to bring us in on how we can actually, how the Pacific is actually focusing on this and strengthening this within our current policies to unlock gender smart investment in the energy sector and to promote enable gender balance within the national energy sector governance and management bodies. Within this, all these ministries, all the government bodies are actually focused in order to make this a good picture or create a path for how we can actually involve every woman. You know, now I have been with the data that we have, with the past policies and the current policies, there has been a major increase of women in the energy sector, especially in the past around 2015, where current policy was just floating around. There was around 3%. Now, if you see the data that has been collected altogether, there's around about 38% of women in the Pacific now that actually is involved with solar installations, with electrifications around the communities, also maintaining the systems within the communities. We have 13,500 solar home systems around the maritime islands. These are maintained by women. Just to clear that in the air, there's a program currently ongoing now, and it's a Barefoot. I believe some of us are well aware. This was brought from India, and then it was brought to Fiji. It actually trains women on how to maintain solar systems. You know, as I showed before, the focus areas are the one out from the bigger islands. One thing is transportation. And second thing is when you try and go, you know, and the cost just to go and maintain just one system. So those are the areas that these are focused on. How we can improve that? We have to strengthen this. I've been mentioning it all everywhere I go. If NGOs, institutions, research institutions, also universities can work with our colleagues from Barefoot. Currently, they are building a center, training center now in Fiji, that is currently focused on trying to actually train around 300 women a year. So the focus now, we are trying to assist them as well, how to create that pathway in order to make, we are saying to increase renewables by 100%. The only way is we need women in the energy sector. So those are the areas that we have tried to focus on. We brought in whole holistic view on how we can actually make women be involved in many of the renewable energy projects in the Pacific. These are the current, as I've mentioned already, for Fiji, the electricity access has reached all over Fiji. We have around 96.2%. We have around 13,800 solar home systems that are installed within the maritime islands. Those are the areas that we brought 2 women from each of those communities to actually be trained by Barefoot. And those women are the ones that maintain the system. So in order to strengthen this, we need more help from NGOs, research institutions to actually strengthen the work that Barefoot is currently trying to implement in Fiji. So the renewable energy share, as I've mentioned already, in the Pacific, Fiji is around 96%. And within the Pacific Island, you can see there's been a major increase in the electricity access as well. So these are the areas that actually you can see with data as well, that women has been involved as well within these areas and how it has been improved. And that's where our target is actually being improved. You know, some of the communities that we have, women are managing it. When they are managing the projects within the communities, it works very well. We see that the projects last longer than the men that actually were looking after it. So those are the areas in the Pacific that we also try to highlight and try to strengthen. So just a brief line on how the national energy overview for the Pacific. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniela, for that really great and comprehensive overview. So our next speaker is Ibu Maya Rani Puspita. She's the Executive Vice President of Corporate Finance with PTPLN, Persero. She is a practitioner with more than 15 years of experience in the electricity industry, especially in corporate finance. And currently she's the Executive Vice President of Corporate Finance at PLN since October 2022. And you can read a little bit more about her sort of wide experience, but I will just say that I met Ibu Maya at another event where she was talking about the PLN experience in strengthening women's participation. And I'm really happy that you were able to join us here today, because I think it's a really good experience and process that you're going through that we can all learn from. So welcome, Ibu Maya.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here actually, because this is a very good opportunity for me to share what we've been doing in PLN and Indonesia in general. I think Bu Zoni mentioned about the process. Actually, all of us are here is still in a process of what we can do to improve the gender equity implementation in our own places. So today I would like to share what we've been doing in PLN. Okay, first I would like to talk about the policies and regulations that has been in place in PLN. So actually gender mainstreaming is not really something new in PLN, but in the last few years, we've been making this a very systematic approach. We've been issuing so many regulations internally to make it align with what the government regulations, and also it's more from the support from the financial institutions, because as you know that lenders and then financial institutions are very keen on seeing how the ESG implementations in a company before they can also provide some financing. So from PLN side, especially because I'm in the corporate finance, I've been working with lots of development banks, especially ADB, and I've also seen some colleagues from the World Bank and then USAID. They helped us a lot on developing what could have been the better gender mainstreaming policies in PLN. So in PLN currently, the CEO has already issued some regulations with regard to the gender mainstreaming. The point is that we want to support women to be able to work in PLN safely, because I think some of the speakers in general are agree that energy sector and electricity is also included, that this is a very male dominated sector. So from PLN, for example, you can imagine that if we built a power plant, you can almost see that almost all of them are men. So we need to make sure that the women will be able to work properly and safely in that environmental as well. So that's why we provide a statement of support for the women's empowerment. And then we also have corporate intent for gender mainstreaming. And we also have the regulations with regard to sexual harassment and all things related to gender equity to protect all the employees. And in terms of the procedures, we also have the environmental and social management system. Actually, this is assisted by the World Bank colleagues. We are developing a safeguard that will be more supportive on gender. And we also have the grievance related to gender issues under the grievance redress mechanism procedures, and the procedures is prepared to implement the gender mainstreaming across PLN units. And also in terms of the ESG aspects, I think ESG has been very popular lately, and everyone is talking about ESG. Not PLN is also included with this, especially now that PLN is the energy transition agenda. I think Pak Daniela mentioned about the net zero emissions 2050, but in PLN and Indonesia, especially the net zero emissions is 2060, and PLN is one of the major role that's going to play the net zero emissions 2060. So we also prepare the ESG aspects, including the gender in here, and also for the KPIs, the key performance indicators in a company, we have specifically related KPIs to gender. One of the examples are the representations of women in management, as well as the number of women employees in PLN. Currently, approximately 21% of PLN's employees are women, but the representation in the management is still around 15%. I can show you the figures later on the next slide. And okay. So here I'm going to touch about the gender equality. We mainstream this through 13 focus areas. It's quite extensive. Maybe you can read it later on a website. But in general, we are talking about how we are making sure that the policies, the programs will support the human rights, and the most important part is the non-discriminative and gender inclusive. Of course, we will have to ally with the men for this, because we're not saying that women is the best, they know best. No, it's not. We are talking about how women should also be included in the energy sector naturally, because if we go to the university, for example, and you can see that not many women are participating in the engineering faculty, for example. I'm one of them. I actually, when I start my career in PLN, I was from the system planning team, because I have a background in engineer. But along the way, I moved to the finance, and now I'm here. So this is only showing that how we can actually be flexible in what we are doing, not only looking at where you start. I just want to share that we should be brave. We have to challenge ourselves. We can do better for the future. And I'm going to share what PLN do to support the gender equity. There are many ways that PLN have been done here. Starting from the recruitment process itself, when we find talented people to join the company, we are not having a discrimination where it has to be male. Maybe like decades ago, you will see in an advertisement, we want workers, male, for example. It's not happening anymore. In PLN, we embrace everyone, we include everyone, not only from the gender perspective, but also we have some let's say like disabled people. It's always welcome to the company. So we are making sure not only gender, but we include everyone to be able to participate in the power sector in Indonesia. And also we also have some long-term plan to support the gender inclusions in PLN. We have what we call Silicane program. I think Indonesian people will know what Silicane is. Silicane is a local hero. I'm going to talk about that later on the slides. So, and here I'm just going to show you that this is what our CEO statement to support women's empowerment principles, because I believe that we need to set the tone from the top. We need to ensure that the leaders are aware about how we should include gender mainstreaming in the business, and how this will benefit everyone, not only for the women, but also for the corporation in general. I can share that maybe 15 years ago in PLN head office, we don't even have a nursery room. So it really challenging for the young ladies to be able to balance their work and life. But now with the gender mainstreaming, we are exploring everything that can help the women to work properly in the company, not only in their nursery room, but also some supporting facilities that will be able to help them work better in the environment. And here I can show you the, sorry. Oops, sorry. Too excited. Okay. Here's the composition of management by gender. As I've mentioned that PLN has been working a lot on this. We are trying to develop the capability of the women in PLN, because we don't want to promote people just because they are women. We want to make sure that they are capable enough. Maybe if any one of you joined the open plenary this morning, we have our colleagues from NREL mentioning, highlighting one of PLN team participating in the as one of the best talent in the power system. So that's only an example, and from PLN we keep learning, and we are lucky because we were supported by so many institutions, not only from ADB but also from the World Bank, USD, even from DFED Australia also help us developing the ESG aspect in PLN. This has helps us a lot on improving the quality of the women employees in PLN. And here I'm going to touch a bit about the sexual harassment regulation in PLN. We already have the regulation to protect the women from the sexual harassment, and we also said how the reporting should be, and then how to we also have the imposition of sanctions, the monitoring and evaluations, as well as the mechanism for dealing with sexual harassment. This is want to ensure that the women working in PLN will be well protected. And this is the one where I touched earlier about the Silicane. This is essentially a task force to empower women and build gender equality in PLN. This is supported 100% by the board of directors. So we have so many programs already for this. We have the woman empowerment strategy, and then the learning development. I think some panelists also mentioned about the learning development, because I believe that this is very important for women to be able to develop themselves, because not only because they are women, but because they are capable to do so. And we also develop the woman empowerment communication and public relations, so that they will be able to speak up their mind, how they can present themselves, and then of course representing the company better. And the Silicane program, we have several initiatives here. We have what we call the HEART. First of all, this is the He for She program. This is why we always say that women and men are supposed to work together. We are not. We have to collaborate on this. We cannot do things ourselves. And then we have the empowering program by coaching, capacity building, training, everything that is needed by the women to be able to perform their better for the company and for the community. And then we also have the advanced community for women. This is more like on a diversity inclusion forum, for more on the how we are going to have a knowledge sharing, and how we will be able to support each other. And then of course we are talking about the responsibility. When we talk about leaders, leaders is not only talking about the position in a company, but leaders is more about ourselves, how we can lead ourselves, not only because you have a team underneath you, but it's because you are who you are. You have to be able to lead yourself, and also lead people surrounded by you. And we want to make sure about the trustworthy aspect. We want to build credibility of women, not only in the workplace, but also at home. And we have what we call stronger than before. We want everyone to move forward. We want everyone to be better, So we have many programs, and this I think we can sum them up in several group. First of all is the webinar and capacity building. We have regular webinars involving about gender mainstreaming, because we want everyone to be involved. We want to improve the awareness, not only for women, but also for the whole people in the company and also for the community. And of course, about the capacity building, we've been partnering with many institutions. And then women support, we want as a women leader to be able to coach, to be as a mentor for others to improve their skills. And also we have a scholarship program where women can also try to go to the higher education. I think I'm one of them, where PLN give me the opportunity and give me full scholarship to pursue my higher degree. Sorry, my time is up. But I'll just go through. Sorry, I'm got too excited to be here. And here I'm just going to show you some examples on how gender mainstreaming is also implemented in our programs. I chose 3 big programs here. First one is the Upper Silicane pump storage. So this is aligned with the energy transition that is currently happening in PLN. Actually, Upper Silicane pump storage is going to be the first pump storage hydropower plant in Indonesia, 1,040 megawatt. This is supported by the World Bank and AIIB. And so for the energy transition program, the Upper Silicane is going to play a very important role in the Java Bali system. So in Indonesia, actually approximately 70% of the customers are in the Java Bali island, and the Upper Silicane is going to play like a battery to absorb the intermittent variable renewable energy in the system. So this is going to be a very important project in PLN. And here for the project itself, we already set a specific KPIs related to genders, among other things as the woman staff representations, and then we're also ensuring the gender risk and impact mitigations for the project. And the second project in the middle one, I touch about the result-based lending for the electricity grid development in Kalimantan, Maluku, and Papua. This is actually supported by ADB. Thank you for ADB colleagues. So here we also have some KPIs related to the poor households provided with electricity, where we want to make sure that at least 10% of the households are to be headed by women. And then we also have, I think some of the panelists also mentioned about the solar PV, how we can include women more on this. And we also have this with regard to the training, where we expect that a minimum of participants around 30% will come from the female. And then we also have the education workshop that also targeting at least 30% female participants for this, to ensure that they are able, then they will be able to improve their capability. And the third one, I'm going to touch about the project, a Sustainable and Renewable Energy Access Program. It's another loan from ADB, $600 million US. And here we also have where minimum level of staff trained, at least 23% of those trained are women. And also for the consumer education workshops, we targeted at least 30% women participant in the workshop to increase the knowledge on safe and productive energy use. So these are only few examples of the so many projects happening in PLN. We are trying to include ESG aspects to all PLN's project, including the gender. We are hoping that we will be able to put gender mainstreaming into a broader perspective and implement this in as wide as we can. I think that's all for me. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our panelists for those really interesting presentations. And we had some questions prepared, but you have all been listening to their presentations. I think there's an echo. Not sure why. Are you getting an echo or is okay? All right. So maybe what we can do is I'll invite you to ask some questions now, if there's some burning questions for our panelists. There's a mic over there, so please go ahead. It's in the middle. So yeah, yes, thank you. And maybe if you can introduce yourself and mention who the question is for.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. My name is Vinod Shrivastava. I'm founder and director at Core International, a US company. We're implementing a program in Southeast Asia for USAID, Regional Development Mission for Southeast Asia. I want to thank all the speakers here because the body of knowledge and experience that I heard is absolutely phenomenal. And what it does is tells me something else, which is it made me more depressed than I was. Because the work we have done, we found in 5 countries that we did for the last 2 years, a fairly significant assessment. And what we have found is that most of the countries, both at the corporate level as well as the government level, have very good policies. Policy framework is there, labor laws are there, gender framework are there. But on the implementation side, the success is very mixed. And it hasn't really moved further down. And I'm reminded of a quick one-liner with you. Many, many years ago, I was sitting with Howard Schultz. I'm sure you all know Starbucks coffee. And he was the CEO of Starbucks. And I asked him a question. Why does your coffee cost $3? And Dunkin' Donut buys the coffee from the same place as $1. And he gave me 3 answers. He said, number 1, Vinod, when I started and took over as CEO of Starbucks, I changed the bias that men are not the only ones who can cook and make good coffee. I instituted a training program to enhance, and you can see all over Starbucks that the ratio of men and women is one of the phenomenal ratios. The second thing he told me is that he continued to pursue this on a daily basis. And the third, he said, I'm calling my supplier in Dominican Republic and telling them not to sell any more coffee beans to Dunkin' Donuts. So that's a context that I'm reminded of. And so I'd like to ask a question for anyone here. What can we as government, policymakers, corporate executives, civil society, and academia, what are some of the low-hanging fruits that we can do to sort of light fire under people to move forward? Very brilliant people, very knowledgeable people, very committed people, yet we're not getting as far ahead as we should. So thanks for listening to me, and I'll be delighted to hear some of your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I think maybe that's a great way to start. So why don't we just go down and we start with you.
Can you guys? Okay, good. You can hear me. Well, thank you so much for your question and great anecdote. I'm tentative with your question because I think maybe it's not so much a low-hanging fruit. I think it's a lot of effort, unfortunately, because a lot of the things that you're describing, like writing a policy or other things, they seem like the low-hanging fruit. I can write a document. The government can write a document, and I can write down that I would like more women to be included, or minorities, or the disabled, et cetera. You can say anything you'd like, but if you're actually going to implement it, that's the difference. And so I think from my experience, some of the pieces I've learned is taking the writings that you've done and then being able to show them ways that they can actually commit to writing it. So instead of just writing it and having multiple ideas down, pick 2 and then just do those and start from there. So for example, for the example that I gave, we're talking about a quota. the quota is a great idea if you can incorporate women into the sector. It enhances your support for women, and it helps to generate more leaders. But then maybe the second piece you add is a training like we're doing that can help those leaders feel that they have the tools that they need to be successful in that role. So again, I don't think it's a quick win. That's why I caveat that. But I think, training is important, and to be able to have something where you're not just one-siding it. I'm writing down that I want 30% of women in my sector, and then I'm adding in this training that helps those women succeed at that. Because the idea is a proof point, right? You want them to be able to succeed. You don't just want to put them there and then watch them fail, which also happens. And so I think I'd recommend that. Pick a couple that you can really focus on, that you have the skills to deliver on. And then I think you can be very successful at that. And when one of them is successful, it's very easy to get momentum going, because then you also have leaders that can take on as well. And, as a woman also in energy, we are hungry for the opportunity as well. It's not that, we're sitting there lamenting that those don't exist. If you give us an opportunity, we'll take it. And I think of all the women leaders I've met, I'm most inspired by them as I continue to work, that once I can pick this one thing that can succeed and show off how incredible these people are, it's easy to convince the world.
Thank you. Well, in the perspective from the Pacific, as I read about one of my colleagues, the main focus is capacity building. As I mentioned already, there's a current program that's currently being done in Fiji by Barefoot College. These are the ways that we can actually develop these kind of areas, and also bring up, strengthen the woman within these sectors. And I asked one of my colleagues that has worked with me for the past 8 years, and how come you have never moved, education? She was still just a certified technician. And she said, I've applied 5 times for scholarships, but couldn't get through. One thing that I tried to highlight in most places with the institutions, the focus areas within the Pacific, if they can allow some criteria so that they can open those doors for some of the women, so they can enter into that market, especially for the energy sector. Those are the criteria that we can also, clearly just show them that the capabilities they have done within on ground, they'll be able to also move on. But, because some universities, just an example, one of the criteria within the scholarships is the university that you go to. But there's 2 universities in Fiji, Fiji National University and University of the South Pacific. Fiji National University is not really known around international region. But technically speaking, most people that go to Fiji National University are well adversed with technical experience. But when they try and apply for these scholarships, they are not able to get through because of the scholarships are the university that they go to are not known. So those are some of the criteria we can actually just amend, so that can give us an open door for some of the women, especially some technically experienced people in the Pacific, to create the door path for them, especially for the education sector.
Thank you, Pak Vinod, for the questions. I think we have similar minds here because, when we talk about how we are going to empower women, first of all, we are not just going to hire or promote someone because they are women. So I also believe that capacity building is very important. So if we talk about low-hanging fruits, I think in PLN, what we've done is that we have some leadership program in a short term, say around 2 to 3 months to accelerate their capacity. But in the long run, we also have a program which is like a scholarship. For example, it will give them more long-term capacity and capability to be the next leaders. And we also encourage the senior management, the women senior management, to put the talented women under their wing, so that they can prepare the new generations to be ready to be the next leader. I think that's going to be very important. But also, if we're talking about a way long term, the Silicane program in PLN, we have what we call Silicane goes to school and university, because we cannot deny that PLN as an electricity company, we need more engineers than say finance or legal, which has more women. But if we talk about engineers, there are not many ladies who want to join the university as engineers. So I think that's also one of the things that we want to raise the awareness for the ladies, because now being engineer doesn't mean that you have to hold a hammer, have a screw, and nuts. But now that we have everything, have machines, we have automatic automation in many places. So I think there are more opportunities for women to enter into the engineering sector. So I think that's also one of the things that we've been done to raise the awareness for the lady, to expand their mindset that women can also go into what we call heavy job, as what unlike what we've been done before. Thank you.
I think they've already said a lot, and I agree with that. I guess I just want to add a few points. So I've worked as a gender advisor on a lot of energy projects, and I found that yes, you can create the policies, as Kiera said, but sometimes implementation is mixed. And I think often that comes down to culture change, like, and how people think, and that's really the hardest thing to change, how people think. And many people will feel like, yes, we support gender equity, which is easy to say, but often, people aren't even aware that there's unconscious bias. So that's a long process of educating people, and assessing our own belief systems. And so that's one point. And then you were asking about low hanging fruit. So often, when I've worked on projects, and for instance, there's like a budget constraint, gender is often the first thing that gets cut from the budget. And so that's often a challenge I've run into. When I try to work with the teams, I always say there's a lot you can do with small resources. Like, I've had to be very creative many times to just push for gender activities. And especially during the pandemic, on several projects, we did a lot of virtual events. These were largely like awareness raising events. I worked with Kiera on a project, and we did raising awareness on STEM education for girls in secondary level in West Africa. And so that was being resourceful during a time where you had a lot of constraints. So I think it's just kind of working with the resources you have. There's still a lot you can do even with limited resources.
I think if I can just add, one of the common threads in the presentation was around addressing sort of gender, social, cultural norms. That's not a low-hanging fruit, but it's something that really we need to move the needle on. And just yesterday or 2 days ago, UNDP released its report on gender bias, and looking at sort of how our attitudes on gender bias have changed. And the bad news is that they haven't changed very much. So there's still a great majority of people that believe that, for example, that men make better leaders than women. There's still too many people that believe that women should not be doing certain jobs. So it is something that we really have to focus on. and I think how we focus on sort of changing some of the gender norms, you've heard some of the examples, but I think critically is about creating a pipeline of women that are going to be in entering into those energy jobs, but also how do we make sure that it's not a leaky pipeline, that the policies in the workplaces exist. You know, you talk about having a crash in the workplace and having parental leave and having anti-sexual harassment policy. Those are all like really critical elements that will ensure that women do stay in those jobs that they have traditionally been excluded from. So unfortunately, not low-hanging fruit. It's a long, hard work that is ahead of us. Right. But I think one of the things is we do need to work with other sectors, and we haven't really talked about that. But the education sector, we shouldn't just be looking at sort of secondary and tertiary education, because the attitudes about STEM education actually come in quite early. So girls are actually learning by the time that they're 10. There's already sort of are being sort of led into or believe that they have less ability in certain science-based or math-based subjects. So I think we have to create that pipeline. We have to start early. And finally, just wanted to share, you know, there was an article last week around how the US needs 1 million more electricians to meet its climate goals. We're not talking about engineers. We're talking about, you know, people with different skills that can be gained through TVET and so on. So we need to look at engineering, but we also need to look at sort of how we build the skills, I think, for women to join the workforce across the multiple sort of roles that there will be in the energy transition. And that includes, you know, sort of TVET programs. So are there any other, sorry, I had to kind of step in because I really liked your question. So we have two questions, Imrana and over here. Yes, so if you can go to the mic.
Thank you, Zoni. Imrana Jalal, I'm an ADB staff member. It's wonderful to hear, and I was away for 10 minutes because it was so cold in here, and I had to go and borrow your stole, Zoni. So I'm sorry if I've got your stole on. But I just found this session really, really interesting. And I'm very proud because I'm a Fijian, and it's so nice to know that we have a great gender inclusive energy policy, and we're good at something apart from rugby. So that's really, really good news. Mine is a comment and a question. So one of the consistent things that women tell you, whether it's in the energy sector or the water sector, any of the technical areas where women are traditionally marginalized, is that they get the qualifications, they may get into the institutions, the state-owned enterprises, but when it comes time to take trips around the island or to other parts outside where they're working, their husbands or their family, in-laws or their parents don't want them to go and fix things because it means staying overnight somewhere, because you've already got them, they're a minority anyway, right? So if they're getting into a Fiji Electricity Authority car and driving around the island, they may be the only woman in a vehicle of 4 men. And so that is why they don't, a very small reason why they don't progress. And I wondered if any of your institutions have consciously thought about that and thought what you might do to try to mitigate that problem and encourage more women to participate that, because that, the more you practice, the more opportunities you get for promotions, right? And if you're going to be the one technical person saying, I'm sorry, I won't do an overnight trip, well, that's held against you eventually. So I wondered if you had any ideas how we could overcome that. Thank you.
Thanks, Imrana. Anyone would like to tackle that question? Okay.
So thanks for your question. It's very timely, and it's definitely very relevant. I actually was having a conversation with a woman who's a CEO of a power company last week in Nepal. And she was talking about how many women don't want to go into the field because they don't have female bathrooms at the hydropower plants that they're visiting. So I just visited a hydropower plant like a month ago, and no one knew where the women's bathroom was. They did have one, by the way. But it like no one could find it because I was in, I was with a bunch of men going to a hydropower plant, and all the workers there, they're not all men in Australia. This power plant does have representation, so that's great. But it was just a very anyway, I'm just saying it because it's very interesting, and it makes it a little bit more difficult for women that's not included. So I'm going to fall back on my presentation a little bit and say that I think the key is more women leaders that are providing input at the top in the design of what you're doing, or at least including some type of representation in the design of what we're doing. If I was on the panel for a hydropower plant development, I would make sure that there was a women's bathroom there. And I would certainly make sure, I think that, there's different perceptions of how women deal in management, et cetera. If I can be biased, because I am also a woman, I think, there's studies also that show that women are more likely to discuss these issues or to be that kind of more empathetic with their colleagues. They're more likely to incorporate other people's ideas. That's not to say that men do not do this. I'm not saying that at all, but I think it's just a different perspective because also we haven't had access for so long. So you're more likely to listen to someone else that also doesn't have access. And so it's not a short-term response to what you're saying, but including them or people that have representation or experience with that. So if there is a woman that's going on these trips, for example, that you're talking about and able to tell her story to other women, I mean, representation matters, role models matter. And the more likely you are to have a voice is because someone has been there before you. And so someone has to kick it off, obviously, and someone has to be kind of that guinea pig. But I think that helps to generate the things that you would need to make that more possible. In terms of actually convincing, for example, if you were on a utility trip, I think the business case of customer service and revenues, I mean, better customer service you are, more likely people are to pay for their utilities, to pay for their electricity use, or to, connect to it. Again, women help with those things. And so there's a story already you can tell, for example, utility who needs to hire those people. But for the women themselves, I think you need that role model and that representation to kind of connect with others and see that. And then also to include them in the design so that they make sure that the things that you need, like security or an extra room or a different room in a different location, et cetera, that woman would make her more comfortable, that those things can be included. It's not that much of an additional cost, even if there is a cost, which can be in different cases, almost nothing. So.
Sure. Allow me to add. Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think what Bu Kira mentions also that from our perspective that we need to set the tone from the top because the senior leaders has to support the company to ensure that women also have their facilities as well to make sure they are comfortable and of course safe. Just like for example myself. In these business trips, I'm here by myself for days. So I always believe that community should also be able to support you, not only from the company itself, but also from the family and of course for the whole system. Because for example, if I say, okay, I'm going to go to Manila for a couple of days, by myself, people might think, will you be safe there? So it's very important that everyone will also aware about this. So I can say that Philippines is very safe country. I can go there by myself safely. But that's why if we go to another places, it might not be in a similar situation. So that's why I always encourage everyone to make sure that safety and gender equity is something that needs to be implemented not only on the corporate level but also on the government, the community, and everyone. So women can also pursue their dreams in a similar to what men can do. Thank you.
Thank you. We only have a few minutes, so I don't know if you'd like to take a minute since it was a Fiji question or.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a pretty good question for the Pacific. Many of those questions are always asked for women, especially doing projects in the interior of Fiji. Because the houses in Fiji, once you go to go do projects within the villages, it's not first-class houses. It's just an open house where everyone will just sleep. And the bathroom is an open bathroom. It's always outside. And the questions are true. The husbands always ask, who are you going with? What other group of people are you going with? And where are you sleeping? Those are the real questions that are asked. Technically speaking, 11 years in the Department of Energy, we have a few female staff that actually do project implementation as well. What we have done inside the department, we have strengthened the bond inside the department. So the officers inside actually know individual staff's husbands, wives. We strengthen that bond so that when an actual staff goes out, the husband doesn't speak. The husband knows, oh, she's kept safe. Because in the areas, in some particular areas in where we travel, especially out in the maritime islands, it's boat goes once a month and comes back again after another month. So it takes time for them to stay in the particular area. Sometimes flights are not available. And if the weather is bad, the boat moves again for another week or two. So those are the areas as well. We actually strengthen as well within the department. When we bring in women into the department, we highlight that as well to them, that they'll have to take this particular role. Because most of these projects that we are doing is not within the city. It's always outside the rural and maritime. So when we bring them in, we actually highlight it to them, make them see the whole picture of what the role is about. And also if they accept it, and then we create that bond within the department to actually see that she's well kept safe, and she's in good hands. Thank you.
Thank you. We're almost out of time, but I just wanted to, yes, I'll just take one more question. I don't know if are we allowed to stay 2 more minutes? Yes, okay. So I think
Thank
there's
you.
a break after. So for those of you who would like to extend a little bit, let's do that. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Erin. I'm from NLX, a renewable energy company based in Europe. I'm based in China. So I just wanted to mention that the word gender equality, I feel like it's misused because genders can never be equal, right? They're born physiologically different. So, and in my understanding is that for a female to go out and, you know, be empowered and be reach their own goals, I think the most important aspect is the support of their male counterparts within their environment. So their fathers, the husbands, sons, or other males within the family or their community. And from this session, I've seen a lot of training and opportunities given to girls and females to help them be empowered. But what are you guys doing to help the males to support women in our community? Because if you look around this room, it's mostly females, right? Listening to this gender equality session. And as we saw in the morning, this whole event is probably dominated by males, and they're probably in those rooms over there. So yeah, and I'm the mother of 2 boys. So this is a very personal question for myself too. So what are we teaching the men in our world to help support women? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. I think there were 2 other hands up. So why don't we take those 2? So I'm sorry, please go ahead. The lady in the green, sorry. Yes, you. And then Nina in the back. Yeah, but very short question so that we'll just do the same thing. We'll go across and give everyone a chance to respond to whichever question they want to respond to.
Thank you for giving me chance. I have short stories about me itself. I am from Nepal, and my name is Sabina Preti. I work in government office. It's Nepal Electricity Authority, and I got chance to be the plant chief, the first plant chief of any office itself. Panauti power plant it is. It's 2.5 megawatt, and it's I get sorry for the. I represent myself for the MDs or to be. I want and I can be for that plant chief. So I think I should. We all women should be should be go in front and tell about that. I also can do. I heard just a question only, but I was the person to go there and tell. I am the first person for the NEA in Nepal Electricity Authority. I'm first woman to be the plant chief also. It's a small plant, but it's good to be plant chief. And I think Ma'am Kaira has worked with NEA for many other ladies also. I saw their photos of our senior members. It was good experience in this. So I want to tell this story only. It's not a hanging fruits you said, no, before. Yeah, you should grab from the above itself. I want to tell
Thank
that
you.
only.
Thank
Yes,
you so much for sharing your
And-
experience.
And Ma'am Kaira ma'am said that mostly the power house, they don't have ladies toilet. Me, myself, in my own office, I also don't have ladies toilet. It's common bathroom. And there are 20 staff, and I'm the only lady staff in there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Very briefly, Nina, and I think then
Brief comment question. My name is Nina Kolobashkin. I'm with the Climate Investment Funds. And I wanted to elaborate on the man comment. First of all, I wanted to make a comment that it's really great that this panel talking about leadership had a mix of focus on individual women agency, but also the policy frameworks, the company frameworks. It was great to hear about the national level frameworks, because I think it is really important to do it from both sides. And very often we focus just on the women, but that's definitely not enough. There has to be the environment. But talking about the men and also the need to focus on the norms, changing values, changing norms, working with the communities. And a couple of speakers mentioned it, but didn't elaborate. So it would be really great about what you do on that. And also the question, we're kind of talking linearly about going forwards and getting better, which is amazing, but that's not the reality story right now. If we look around the world, if we look at gender equality, actually in the past 2 years, there have been significant rollback in many countries. And also like when, for example, if we look at COVID and the impact in countries where there has been, I'm currently living in the US, the fallout from the labor market, women were the first ones to really withdraw because of the childcare responsibilities, etc. So with this rolling back, but also there is a conversation with the pushback that the more there is this pressure and women leadership and programs, that there is the pushback from the men. So how to deal with that, how to work with both genders, but in such a way that there is no rollback, but we're working towards it together. It would be really interesting to hear. Thank you.
I'm afraid that might take another session. So there's 3 more sessions on gender equality and energy. So I encourage you to go to all those sessions as well. And also for the question that you asked about, in the other sessions, where are the women? Please do ask that question. Don't tell them I sent you though. So I'm going to start at this end with Ellen, and then finish with Kira. So, but just if I can just ask you like your 30-second answer to any of the questions that were asked.
Okay, there were so many.
I know. I'm sorry.
Points raised. Just I guess because I've been doing recently a lot of male allyship work. I guess the rationale for that, and I think it was already mentioned earlier, that we can't just focus on the women. The men have to be partners in this and cannot be left out, because it is gender equality. So all genders, not just, it's not even a binary, so all genders. But the giving of some accommodations to women is because they're very disproportionately affected by many things. So that's why. But we teach men to be allies to women. I think that's my 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. So I have another 30 seconds. So from my side, actually, when we develop the gender program, we include men as well. So when we talk about the Silicane program, we have several programs to develop women But what we've been doing, if we have the webinar, we have the training, it's not only for women, but also men. In our company, we have a series of webinars specifically related to ESG, where everyone in the company has to follow the training. They have to read the materials. They have to click here and there to ensure that they are really reading everything. So that's also part of our effort to ensure that we are talking about community, not only women, because as mentioned, that this should be a collaboration between women and men. It's not only women. So that's how we try to manage it, by including everyone in the company in to support, so that and we if we talk about the bigger picture, the community will support women as well. Thank you.
So my colleague just passed to me. So I'll try to do this very quickly. But first of all, ma'am, I'd like to congratulate you for your great work and for asking for that role. I think that's incredible. And kudos to you for having the strength to do that. You are a role model for other women in the sector, and I hope you know that. I think for me, the biggest thing I can say for incorporating men is that, you know, we teach girls certain things. Right now, we teach them that they can't be technical. We should stop doing that and start teaching them they can be technical and they can have access to those things. We teach boys that they don't have to think about this. We should not do that. We should teach them that they need to think about this. We need to be smarter about the way that we're telling our kids or telling our colleagues about these things. These aren't trainings that are just for women. It's about teaching women to communicate about issues that they have. We need to teach men to communicate as well, that they cannot say certain things that would disadvantage others. Just as I would never say that about someone, I would expect them not to do it to me. So I think it comes down to teaching the right rhetoric. The issue is not that they're incapable in either way. It's not the physical differences even, actually. Of course, we're physically different. Great. But we can do the same things in this field. So in the energy sector, I am an engineer. I am just as smart as my male colleague. I can solve all those crazy math problems the same as he can. Does it mean that I want to do that job? No, please don't. I don't want to do that. But I can, and that's the point. And so I think it's showing people that you can. And so it's important for all of you guys to teach your kids that. I'm going to teach mine that. You know, men and women, you know, you are capable of doing this. And the thing that I like to think that we are doing with our training program is teaching women that same thing. And so in terms of the question for male allyship, so I didn't get to talk too much in my slide about it, but we do also plan to do similarly to the webinar that I designed, that Ellen designed during COVID that I supported with, that talked to people about male allyship and showed male allies to leaders in the sector, not just women, but men as well. We tend to do the same thing. So no longer a webinar, hopefully, because now we can meet in person, thank God. But it's about showing women and men that there are people that support this. The donors support it, the banks support it, your bosses support it. There are people across the, power plants, the utility, the government, everyone works in this, and it's men and women that are doing it. And so again, representation matters. It's important to have women there. It's important to have men there. But that's true for all of your allyship work as well. So women are allies to each other. That's great. I hope all women support each other. I'm trying to do that actively. But I also need men to support me. And so I hope to show other women that I have men that support me and them as well. So it's the same activity. That's where the equality comes from, I think, from that word, is that you have to have both. And it's really just teaching, it's learning, it's training. We're all trained to do a certain thing. This just needs to be included in it.
I think that's a really great way to end. Daniela, did you want to say something just very briefly, or we can? Okay. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Well, as for gender equity, I just highlighted a few points from a strategic action plan that actually highlights the whole perspective of women and men. But in the Pacific, like I mentioned already, in different places, it has different views and different ways we can actually solve these solutions. But in the Pacific, if we don't educate the men, then gender equity will be a no-no. So the way forward, you have to educate the men. Once you educate the men, they'll have a clear view, clear idea on how to create this, to actually get this into their, especially in the communities, the villages, and involve women actually in some pathways, because men in the Pacific, the women are told that they are house workers. They have to stay home, look after the children, prepare the food. But things has changed because more men are educated now. Things are changing, like I've mentioned already. The trend, the percentage, the changes that has happened, it has increased from 2015. It is increased. So now I believe it's around 30 to 40% of women now that are actually within these sectors. So
Thank you.
for the men being involved, I believe they are already involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking Kira, Ibu Maya, Ellen, and Taniela for this wonderful panel this afternoon. And I hope that you will join the next panel. And tomorrow there's another 2 panels from the Gender Equality Track 1. So thank you for joining us and for sticking it out a little bit into our coffee break. And I hope to see you at the next session. Thank you very much.